Sometimes there will be packages at the door. We'll put them inside for the owner. But usually the name matches up with the owner. I was at a vacant home doing some pictures inside, and mail carrier came and dropped off 3 envelopes. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange because nobody's lived here for over a year.
Well, we actually start getting multiple calls and reports of people saying, hey, I got EDD mail showing up at my address.
Mailboxes across the Sacramento area have been stuffed with letters from the EDD.
Going through them, I see EDD, EDD, EDD.
Some houses got 70 cards sent to them.
All of these crazy incidences of clear fraud.
You know, all of a sudden I said that there was a lottery.
$11.4 billion in fraud.
I did the swiping for EDD, go to the bank and stake at least.
I was pretty sure that the fraud was at least $1 billion.
This is a gargantuan problem.
This is white-collar crime. It's easy money.
Thank you, everybody. I have long believed that the future is not just something to experience, it's something to manifest.
The governor's office and the California Department of Public Health now advising that all of
the U.S. preparing for a possible coronavirus outbreak.
Northern California on heightened alert today.
This is a moment we need to make tough decisions. There's a recognition of our interdependence that requires of this moment that we direct a statewide order for people to stay at home. That directive goes into force and effect this evening.
Oh, it's so heartbreaking. These stories that my staff are telling me, the people that are completely reliant, they have nothing, and they were laid off through no fault of their own, completely because of government direction that this is the way it's got to be for our own good, right? And so they relied on some subsidy, some way to continue their life.
I'm a freelance writer for magazines and newspapers. I've authored and published about 8 books so far, got a couple more in the pipeline. And when we don't have COVID restrictions, I do a lot of public speaking. Because businesses were shut down and restricted, that's the bread and butter to pay guys like me to write for your publication. So that's what knocked out the wind out of my sails for all of last year and still going on today.
What we saw was a simultaneous wave of 2 things. One, a wave of people who legitimately needed their unemployment.
Every day across the state, millions of Californians pick up the phone, scour the website, and hope to get answers from EDD about their unemployment benefits.
I got hung up on, or the system's down, and then there's times I call and it's not down. And it's just so frustrating.
Every time I tried to reapply, it said, you can't. So now I get into the phone calls, which never work.
Welcome to the Employment Development Department's Unemployment Insurance Online Assistance Center.
So KCRA 3 Investigates tried to call EDD too. We called the new phone line several times today.
We're currently receiving more calls than we can answer and are unable to assist you at this time. Please try again later.
And they could not get it and could not talk to people and get it resolved. That was one big wave.
We were hearing from desperate constituents who were having trouble putting food at the table, trying to decide whether to pay the rent or pay the groceries, were depleting their life savings, going to an extreme debt, and were incredibly desperate.
Almost simultaneously, we started seeing a big wave of these envelopes by the dozens showing up in people's mailboxes.
I put out an email to a group of realtors that I know, and I said, is this an unrelated happening, or have you guys seen it too? I was amazed at the response I got. There was quite a few agents that said, yeah, I was in a home yesterday where there was a stack of mail there from the EDD with various names.
When Crystal Campagna opened her mailbox Tuesday evening, it was stuffed.
Pulling out all this mail, that's a lot of bills. And going through them, I see EDD, EDD, EDD.
I've been working on fraud and mail fraud and bank fraud and wire fraud cases for 10 years now, and EDD benefits have always been one of the things that are valuable in the mail. And if mail thieves come across EDD benefits, I've certainly seen those get exploited for many years now.
There was a case where an agent responded to my email, and I asked him if he could go back to the house and get the letter so we could turn them in to the authorities. And when he went back there, he said, well, they were no longer there. Somebody had broken the window, gotten into the house, and taken those letters. About then, I got a call from Assemblyman Patterson's office asking, have I seen this happening? I said, yeah, I'm starting to see it happening.
Individuals at a single-family residence who would have a dozen show up in their mailbox to different names at that address. And people receiving them actually became a bit frightened and a bit concerned.
Because of the break-ins and such, just some safety precautions, like taking some PVC pipe, cutting it to fit, placing it there.
When was your first indication with all these letters? Do you remember when it all started for you guys?
Yeah, it was late February, early March of last year. We got some notifications. People said they were getting multiple letters from people who had never lived at that residence, and they want to know what to do with the letters. And we asked them to bring them to our office, because we wanted to collect them, because we were going to follow up on them. That was the very beginning. Okay, so you're saying I don't have access?
I say read.
You don't have to be rude about it.
I'm not being rude.
I know how to read,
I'm not being rude. I didn't say anything. I said this is what it says.
They wouldn't even let me go in to access the people. The security people wouldn't even let me in. I'm an elected official, not that I should be treated differently, but I represent 500,000 people, so let me help you, right? Communicate. And it didn't happen.
Amy Brooks has been waiting on her own unemployment benefits, and so far, the only money she's received doesn't belong to her.
I'm now holding 3 different debit cards for somebody who may or may not have a claim. I don't know how 22 pieces of mail, all to the same address with different people's names on it. I don't know how that gets past somebody.
We tried to reach out to EDD, didn't get a response. Or we heard that EDD was telling folks to just get rid of the letters or to mail them back to EDD, just answers that didn't make any sense to us.
EDD's statement to us today also mentioned that you can file a fraud report on their website if you've received one of these letters. The agency hasn't given us a specific number of how many of these letters are out there, so we have no idea right now how widespread this fraud is or how much money has been lost.
Some houses got 70 cards sent to them. That should be a flag that someone should have said, oh, this is a problem. We got 70 EDD cards going to a house that's only occupied by 2 people.
Then what did the governor's office have to say about this, Brian?
Nothing, really. I mean, just to give you the short answer, Golston, nothing. I reached out to 2 of the...
Initially, we would follow proper protocol would be to say, hey, you need to contact EDD. They have their own law enforcement investigations division. They are the custodian of records. They have control of all records that we would need in this case. Then we started hearing people weren't getting anybody there. The phone would ring off the hook. They just weren't able to contact anyone there. So that's when we started stepping in at first just to kind of see what was going on. We made some calls over to EDD that we weren't able to get a hold of anybody. We actually had city residents, Riverside residents, that were being accosted by people. So imagine the suspect or suspects would show up at folks' homes and say, hey, I think you got my mail, some EDD mail. And if they didn't turn over that mail, the folks would get kind of loud, almost threatening at times. And that's when we said, okay, we need to intervene. We need to do something here because we can't have our citizens being accosted by folks.
A lot of burglaries happen in the middle of the day. During the pandemic, people have been home, so we were getting reports of mail theft, throughout the day, really. But the alarming increase is in the number of carriers who are being stopped on the streets while they're delivering mail and being robbed, either at gunpoint or with threats or physical force. And that's just unacceptable.
These are the letters right here that we received in about 1 month. This is my district alone.
I was getting stonewalled, and I wanted to show them how severe this problem is. In my district alone, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these letters that are accumulating tens of thousands of dollars that are going fraudulently. And we have this frustration of this segment of our population that can't get anything.
What is your understanding of how widespread this fraud may be? And also, what's your reaction to the call from some legislators for a swift emergency audit of EDD to better understand the scope of this fraud problem?
Yeah, we've got a brand new team, 5 new people we just put into place at EDD just in the last few weeks. So 5 new people with fresh perspective, new capacity to get in under the hood and figure this out.
So there was a guy who put a rap video together about how easy it was to get money from EDD, right?
It was like, oh my God, this is pathetic.
But the dumb ones that are going to do that stuff and brag about it, and he did. I saw the video. He's bragging about ripping off EDD. That is brazen. That is brazen, and these guys, they don't care.
I just been swiping for EDD. Go to the bank and stack at least. This shit is better than selling peas. I made some rent that I couldn't believe.
In previous times as a freelance writer, you wouldn't have been able to apply for unemployment under that, but because of the CARES Act, you were theoretically able to under what's called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance.
Yes, and I never expected to get that.
Beginning Tuesday, April 28th, help is on the way. The state will be launching a new website and app known as PUA, or Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, for thousands of Californians who work for themselves.
I mean, if I'm eligible and it's legitimate, I will try. If it's being spread around, it's everybody's money kicking into this, everybody's tax money.
I'm a member of the Cybercrime and Underground team, which, as the name implies, a lot of our focus is on financially motivated criminal activity. Anytime there is a big event in the world, and I say that broadly, that we can expect criminals to try to capitalize on that event.
One more day. Tomorrow we are going to win.
It could be something like a major election in a country. There's always going to be criminals trying to profit off of something that's going on in the world. Unfortunately, many of these fraudsters are using popular messaging platforms such as Telegram, and even sometimes will circulate these advertisements on social media platforms.
There was another chapter of this EDD saga that involved a second vendor, Bank of America. Bank of America was engaged to help provide EDD debit cards to California constituents.
The EDD has introduced the new EDD debit card, a faster, more convenient, and more secure way of receiving those needed benefits.
Now, these debit cards lacked the anti-fraud chip technology that has been standard for the banking industry for years.
We were finding that, of course, folks were receiving this mail and reporting it to us. We were doing probation parole searches at homes and finding significant amounts of mail. Also car pullovers. We would do a vehicle stop and we would contact the suspect, who may have anywhere from 10 to 20 EDD cards on his or her person, and all different folks' names.
Now in Torrance, we have 2 main banks in our city. One is in downtown Torrance and the other one is up in the north end of our city. And so they decided we're just going to go set up surveillance on these ATMs and see if we come across anybody. Within the first hour of setting up on surveillance on that ATM, they saw a suspect arrive in a vehicle. He walks over to the ATM, he's acting suspiciously, and they would see him pull out a card, put it in the ATM, and then he would take the cash. Another card, cash, another card, cash. He did this 5 times and then decided to leave, and so they had patrol units in the area make a traffic stop on that subject, and they seized $5,000 in cash along with 5 different EDD cards. They identified one suspect who was basically acting as a middleman for a lot of people.
And the bad guys would walk you through picture by picture or step by step, just detailing, okay, this is the best method that you can do for filing a claim with this specific state.
Saying, hey, I know how the system works. I can get you set up on EDD and get you benefits, but I'm going to charge you a fee. Got search warrants for the hotel room in his vehicle, and in the trunk of his vehicle, he had $85,000 in cash. So there was one person in particular who was showing all kinds of video and pictures of him having stacks of cash on the dash of his car and then bragging about how he's furnishing his house with a brand new refrigerator and buying his mom a Mercedes. But because there was so much evidence, detectives had to rent a U-Haul box truck to go with us on the search warrant. So when we served that search warrant, we ended up seizing all that evidence, which included the refrigerator, the washer and dryer, the laptops, the tablets, the shoes, and even Mom's brand new Mercedes. Mom was not happy about losing her Mercedes.
Hello, this is an NCIC operator calling from El Dorado County, Placerville Jail.
Hi, babe.
Hi.
How's everything going?
One of our colleagues from the North State, one of the elected DAs from Lassen County, had sent an email to kind of a listserv that we have asking if anybody has started seeing EDD fraud within the prison system.
I guess my money will have to sit in the account for a while. Just keep filling up. Like tell Lori to check it again, see if I'm eligible for any more weeks.
The amount of fraud that we found was astronomical.
First it was, as I said, state prison inmates, then it was jail inmates, and increasingly over time we're learning here in El Dorado County, literally half of the inmates in the jail were collecting unemployment benefits. And that was much the case throughout the jails and the prisons throughout the state of California.
I was interested in knowing who was ripping off the system or who was making claims, I should say, because not all the inmates, it's not them. It's somebody stealing their name or somebody on the outside using their name. But I was shocked at how, it was Minnie Mouse making a claim or Poopy Britches making a claim.
These cases include the names of notorious convicted murderers, including Scott Peterson, Wesley Shermantine from the Speed Freak Killers, and serial killer Carrie Stainer.
And I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous.
If you talk to her tomorrow, I don't want you too much over this phone, so you might want to tell her she might want to transfer that off her card to something else too.
Okay.
Just, to be safe.
They all knew about it. And when the first time early on, listening to a jail conversation that was recorded where an inmate is telling his girlfriend how to fill it out, and she expresses reservations and saying, we're going to get caught. This is so easy. There's no way this could be right. And he said, you don't understand. Everyone in here is getting paid. We need to get ours. It's staggering. When you're talking about thousands of convicted felons that are engaged in this behavior.
You were holding a press conference just to sort of get attention to it because nobody was paying attention.
Anne-Marie Schubert, myself, a number of other DAs, we did a press conference for the exact reason you said. No one was paying attention to it.
The EDD Fraud Task Force found inmates within every prison and jail in the state collected unemployment.
It is perhaps and will be one of the biggest fraud of taxpayer dollars in California history.
Well, here we sell, like soup to nuts, I say, cradle to grave merchandise for everyone. Well, we went from closed, we had curbside pickup. We went open till, the traffic was insane. People were coming in with wads of cash. Really, you didn't really have to sell them anything. They were just taking whatever they wanted and going into cash. It looked like, all of a sudden I said that there was a lottery, they won the lottery. They were certainly renting the best cars in LA. The rentals were hot. You could see more Rolls Royces in LA all of a sudden. It was not unnormal to get a $3,000 sale every 2 hours.
It's crazy that these jewelry stores in Rodeo Drive are having people walk in with staggering amounts of cash and EDD cards to buy things.
There's something up. I'm telling you, this is not normal. If you're on unemployment, how are you buying these slippers from Paris for $125?
Dozens of arrests for identity theft and fraud, not here in Sacramento, but in Beverly Hills.
They fly into the state, they stay in nice hotels, they rent high-end cars, and then they take that money and also go to Rodeo Drive and other areas around town.
We don't have that many luxury brands that are on Rodeo that are American. It's mostly European, French, Italian, British, and they're the ones that benefit. So we were putting money into the Europeans' economy, not the American economy.
Welcome to the Assembly Budget Committee Sub 4 informational hearing on the Employment Development Department. This is our third informational hearing on EDD.
Thank you very much. I'm Mayor Lester Friedman from the city of Beverly Hills. Our merchants advised that they had seen a significant increase in cash purchases as well as the frequent use of EDD cards.
I'm pleased to report there were a total of 111 recommendations. Of those recommendations, we've already completed 22 of them. We are meeting weekly with the governor's office and the agency to ensure that these are all being done swiftly.
Some of us were talking about the fact there's a music video on the web with 400,000 views on how easy it is to defraud the EDD. Are you aware of this?
Yes.
And still no concrete answers from EDD other than there is an active fraud investigation. The agency has not responded to our many requests for an on-camera interview, and it's refusing to tell us how widespread this fraud is and how much money has been lost.
Since the beginning, when we started to see this combination of EDD, guns and drugs, this is a very concerning combination.
Roseville police have arrested a man they believe to be the leader of a big crime ring.
Today we took down an EDD fraud ring involving gang members and people who are currently in state prison for long prison sentences.
The 29 people who were indicted, some of them showed up via Zoom to their arraignment in a Monterey County courtroom.
We became the magnet for fraud, this state, out-of-state inmates in Florida.
Federal investigators broke up an unemployment fraud ring that targeted California's Employment Development Department among several other states.
Cops from New York are saying, oh yeah, they're all coming to California to do this because it was so easy.
Charging documents state they operated out of 2 different apartments in Hyattsville, Maryland over the last year. Investigators caught some of the transactions from ATM cameras.
We had an informant actually log on to a computer and show us how easy it is to go on the website of EDD.
This channel is saying that they advertise tutorials along with methods to create fraudulent documents and the sale of fulls, which is a term for a package of personally identifiable information, somebody's name, their social security number typically, could be date of birth, address, just it's easy, convenient package for fledgling criminals to purchase at low cost that they can then use to commit fraud.
The economy's booming, but they didn't realize what it was booming with, fraudulent money. And then we have our local government, the mayor here, Eric Garcetti, Gavin Newsom, the governor, he's well aware of what was happening.
Would you have any idea how much money taxpayers have lost due to some of these fraudulent claims?
No, that's not something that we track.
Okay, that's a little
It's
frustrating.
going to be in the hundreds of millions.
Yeah, it will.
We have multiple criminal rings stealing from tens of thousands of people's identities, from bank accounts, from personal property, and your department has been silent. And your department has been silent. You're saying you don't want to. Of course, we don't want to tell fraudsters how to do their job. They're already doing their job. But you're not warning the public on the level of fraud that's happening. You've given no detail on the types of crimes that are being committed against people so that people can be aware of what to look out for.
We've done a lot of public messaging as well as in our news release every Thursday.
And this is information that KCRA3 investigates and state lawmakers have been trying to get for weeks. EDD says it has frozen 693,000 claims. However, it's still trying to figure out which ones of those are legitimate and which ones are not.
I'm going to say it right here, but I'm sure there's been at least over $1 billion of fraud. I don't know what that number is, but strikes me it's something that someone ought to investigate. I remember discussing with my staff whether I should even put the B number out there, because I was pretty sure that the fraud was at least $1 billion, and I felt comfortable enough to say that. We had no idea that the fraud would be at least 10 times that amount and coming.
This is bureaucratic criminal negligence.
The director of California's Employment Development Department, or EDD, is retiring. Sharon Hilliard has worked at EDD for 37 years.
In an email to staff today, she said, "I have been committed to seeing the EDD through the most challenging times in the department's history, but I believe I can now retire knowing that the EDD is on a great path to success."
And just today, Governor Newsom was asked about the issues people are having getting access to their unemployment benefits.
And while the governor did not mention the EDD director by name, he did recognize the issues that the department has had over the past few months.
We are very cognizant about the need not only address the situational challenge, but also address the medium and long-term challenges to once and for all fix the EDD system. And so that, I can assure you, is underway.
I tried to get EDD audits and tried to get accountability committees to take a look. And quite frankly, there was, I believe, a protectionist attitude by the majority party, because the governor in times past really stepped in and had members of our audit committee kill audits that might embarrass the administration. I've seen that firsthand.
This is KCRA 3 News at 6.
We begin with the KCRA 3 investigation into the growing evidence of potential widespread fraud with EDD payments. Tonight, state lawmakers are calling for an emergency audit.
They either have this information or they don't. If they have it, disgorge it right now. If they don't, shame on them for not having the technology, the ability, and the expertise to find out the answers to our questions.
Millions of Californians filed for traditional unemployment insurance and the newly established federal pandemic assistance programs. Of the $114 billion in unemployment benefits paid by California since March, approximately 10% has been confirmed as fraudulent. However, many of these claims are still being investigated.
KCRA 3 News at 10 on My 58.
And tonight at 10, accountability and answers. That's what California lawmakers are hoping to get from an emergency audit of the troubled Employment Development Department.
Nothing moves bureaucracies faster than having Elaine Howell down their back.
We will begin our panel.
My name is Elaine Howell. I'm the California State Auditor.
We had 40 members sign on to the emergency audit request, 33 assembly members, 7 senators. That happened in September of 2020.
We knew in this office that EDD was ripe for waste, fraud, and abuse because Elaine had put it on her watch list.
So we identified that money coming into California as a high-risk issue for our state. So that gave my office the authority to conduct additional work.
So the Newsom administration was warned by the auditor prior to EDD failing this large and did nothing about it.
And there was enough that you did 2 separate audits, right?
Right. So there were several questions the members were concerned about. Certainly those individuals who were having difficulty working with EDD, either trying to get through the call center, trying to get their claim filed.
Tilly Corser applied for partial unemployment benefits over a month ago.
I haven't seen anything.
Like many Californians, she turned to the EDD website, California's Employment Development Department, for help. But getting answers isn't easy.
But then there were issues where people were concerned that perhaps their identity had been stolen. So we split it into 2 different audits. We have some examples in the audit report where we talked about the suspicious addresses.
This is where they sealed us up. Here.
Jill Ayers started getting the letters in this mailbox weeks ago. The Postal Service blocked the outgoing mail slot in her community mailbox, but that doesn't stop fraudulent letters from arriving.
The whole stack were there the first day that I picked them up.
There is no sugarcoating the reality. California did not have sufficient security measures in place to prevent this level of fraud?
I think the UI fraud, not only in California but across the country, is the most significant fraud occurrence that has happened for the United States.
It's probably the biggest fraud in California history.
It's the biggest fraud in American history. The biggest fraud. 100%.
When we issued the report in January, we thought it would be around $10.5 billion.
An additional 17% of the paid claims has been identified as potentially fraudulent.
They said, no, we're thinking it's more like $19 billion, and I know some of those estimates have gone up even more since we issued our report in January. So huge amount of fraud, unfortunately, in our state and I think across the country.
It has been a parade of horribles, just a cascade of errors on top of errors, starting with an antiquated IT system that no one knew how to use or no one could fix or no one could improve. You add onto that leadership that hasn't been accountable.
We have evidence of U.S. Department of Labor sending communications in April of 2020, again in May of 2020, and specifically in that communication was you need to keep certain controls in place.
KCRA 3 Investigates has obtained court documents that show the Secret Service has been investigating this kind of fraud since at least May.
A lot of the fraud appears to be related to the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. So you would think you would have put a lot of resources on that and really thought through and worked with the federal government. Okay, here are the requirements for the program. What are the kinds of controls we can or should put in place to try to mitigate fraud as much as we possibly can.
We verified addresses from North Carolina, Florida, and found possible matches in Oklahoma, Wyoming, and Arkansas, all with real names.
I reside in Snow Hill, North Carolina.
Names like Molly Battle. Battle lives in North Carolina, but according to EDD records, she lives here in California.
EDD is trying to be transparent and putting out there that, you know, we're suspending this, we're suspending that.
Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, PUA, show up in many cases as a search option, as its own category.
And people who are, you know, wanting to defraud the state of California are paying attention to that and saying, oh, okay, well, if those controls are eliminated, there is a possibility here where I could file a claim and hopefully get some money from the state of California that I'm not entitled to.
People who get unemployment still have to pay taxes on that money, and EDD declares that to the IRS with a form called the 1099-G.
There are some individuals who still may not know that their identity's been stolen. What will happen is they'll get, come tax time early next year, they may receive a 1099 essentially saying, from EDD, saying you received X amount of money in unemployment benefits.
EDD is sending out nearly 8 million tax forms, some of them
I was issued a 1099 self-employment, a 1099-G from the government for income that I had received when I had never received any income, which still had to go into my taxes.
The tax implications were first brought to us 3 months ago by Molly Battle.
Next year, when it's time to file taxes or anything, they're gonna say, oh, we paid you out $21,900 and I'm gonna be responsible.
After 6 months, he finally did get a letter from EDD in his mailbox, but it wasn't an unemployment check. It was a tax form.
$1,400. And yeah, that's kind of insult to injury.
My level of frustration with this agency is endless, and it's clear we need top to bottom reform.
Modesto Congressman Josh Harder is angry with California's Employment Development Department. KCRA 3 Investigates was first to inform Harder that tax documents generated by EDD could be sent to many of those victims. Congressman Harder moved quickly and within days sent this letter to the IRS.
How many of these do you deal with a day?
Oh gosh, dozens. It's slowed down a little bit. It's slowed down now, but in the beginning, it was madness. It was
I'd say it this way: we've helped 3,500 people, and we have 6 people in our office.
You know, look, at its core, this isn't a complicated issue. The IRS needs a list of who actually legitimately got EDD benefits. Going forward, I'd like to see it be automatic, and that every time somebody's actually getting unemployment benefits, that information is getting seamlessly passed back to the IRS. That's the system people think they have, but they don't actually have it in reality.
Now I know they were feeling the pressure of people are unemployed, they're needing their unemployment benefits, we've got to get those payments out the door, but you can't just eliminate controls without doing an analysis of, okay, what's the risk if we do that?
So she was like, you have a card with $21,900 that's due to be paid out to you.
Battle did talk to EDD and was told to call the fraud division, but she couldn't reach anyone there.
So they were getting inundated with these claims of identity theft, and they did. They had only one person dedicated to working with those individuals who were filing complaints that they think their identity had been stolen. That person did leave in July, so that left a huge void, and those claims were not being processed.
At one point, EDD had fraud detection software that was working fairly well, and we were told that they just didn't want to spend the money on it anymore, and that could have helped in some ways.
That's correct.
We founded Pondera Solutions in 2011 with the singular focus of leveraging the massive power of cloud computing and advanced analytics to combat fraud, waste, and abuse in large government programs.
I had a meeting in 2015 with the head of EDD, and I had heard several times that there was a fraud detection system that was probably the most robust system that was built to work across platforms and identify suspected fraud on the front end and prevent the money from going out that way.
And a former EDD employee who wishes to remain anonymous emailed KCRA3 Investigates saying the same thing. The person said the Pondera system detected an amazing amount of fraud, adding that the Pondera program compared EDD claims with public databases and fine-tuned itself to better detect fraud.
I was told, and I believe it to be accurate, it was approximately $2 million a year to operate the system, and a decision was made to save the $2 million a year.
That's right, EDD shut off Pondera's system. That former EDD employee says the federal grant had run out and someone decided that the bill to continue using Pondera, $10 million over 4 years, was too costly.
And the consequence of we traded $2 million a year for, what, $31 billion plus worth of fraud just here in California.
This is obviously not the first audit you have had to do of EDD.
Right. So we issued a report in 2011 looking specifically at claims processing, their ability to process claims timely, and their call center functionality. And we found pretty significant issues with both.
I've called over 100 times this morning. I can't get through.
Because of budget cuts, EDD has cut the number of hours you can call to ask questions.
We did a follow-up in 2012, still had identified the same problems, and then fast forward to 2020 when we did the emergency audit the legislature asked us to do, and we found the same problems again.
Governor Brown was aware of the problems. Elaine Howe had pointed a lot of that out over a period of time.
Colson, we're hearing for the first time today from the woman in charge at EDD. Even as some Californians say they're still going without unemployment benefits, the Chief Deputy Director of EDD, Sharon Hilliard, told lawmakers today of some of the successes of the agency's new payment system.
Gavin Newsom was familiar with it as well. He inherited the problem.
I want to see the response to the question you just asked, and that's the response from EDD, what they're going to do with these recommendations, these short-term, medium, and long-term recommendations.
But he also inherited an additional warning by the auditor that it was subject to waste, fraud, and abuse, and we just didn't see any significant activity. And it snowballed, and it rolled over the EDD.
Lawmakers say EDD let their constituents out to rot.
Doesn't the EDD have some responsibility for that activity?
Of course, EDD has some responsibilities.
I was involved in two of those hearings, one with the former director and one with the present director.
Fresno Assemblymember Jim Patterson says EDD took off the guardrails, failing to stop fraud, failing to pay the unemployed, and angering people across the state. Rita Sines, EDD's new director, agreed.
Should people be pissed off because they did everything right and then what happened was EDD screwed up and, of course they should be.
And both of them just sat there and either didn't know the answer or the answers were so startling we really couldn't believe that the fifth largest economy in the planet state of California, large population, the technology center of America, if not the world in Silicon Valley, couldn't process unemployment in a safe, reliable way. Utter, complete failure.
What percentage of the recommendations that you recommended have they already implemented to date, to your knowledge?
Our understanding that they haven't done any of them yet, although I would note they agreed with all of the recommendations.
That's disheartening to me because with all the going on right now with EDD, to put it blank, they should be, Johnny on the spot, taking all the state auditors' recommendation to secure and to make sure that fraud is not going to take place and people are not going to be disenfranchised as a result of their blunder.
Thank you, Madam Chairpersons, for organizing this very, very important hearing and permission to use the prop. I don't think people have captured in their mind the enormity of the amount of money that has been issued errantly to undeserving people. This wasted money could have purchased 16,789 California homes at the median price point paid for a California home. And it could have also paid for 4 years of schooling at a UC university, and that total of students would amount to 2,065.
I think you point out a very serious problem that is a bipartisan issue that we have all been trying to find solutions for.
Down on fraud. EDD just announced McGregor Scott will help the state prosecute people who defraud the unemployment benefit program last year. The state may have lost.
So I have been hired in my private capacity as a partner here with the King & Spalding law firm by the governor's office and EDD.
Well, McGregor was brought in to help solve some of these problems, and I think he has all the right interests, which is let's just get this whole thing back on track so that we can make sure that we're not being ripped off and that the right people are getting the money.
Your ID.me account. One solution for the delays and backlog was an identification system called ID.me.
Many of the things that EDD put into place principally in the fall of 2020, ID.me, Thomson Reuters, some of these other safeguards have really, to a large extent, stopped the fraud from taking place.
Any sort of EDD fraud investigation is sort of complex because first of all we have to acquire the applications. The applications, of course, being housed at EDD itself.
So we haven't been able to charge all these people with the fraud because we need those records to prove that.
EDD was, and to a certain extent still is, way behind on processing those search warrants and other requests for documentation that have come into them from law enforcement.
And then we have to play the waiting game, in many cases several months before we start getting records back.
A couple of the things that we have worked on and have accomplished is to create a memorandum of understanding that a local or state or federal law enforcement agency can now sign with EDD so that whole search warrant process can be bypassed. And they can go directly to EDD through the MOU to get the documents that they need.
I know our other detectives have submitted warrants as far back as December and January, and we still haven't received a large portion of them.
I encourage you to tell them to call me because we're going to fix that. Because what we're going to do is we're going to set up this MOU between the agency and EDD, and the documents will flow.
We have a full-time prosecutor on this program. We have a full-time prosecutor. They could spend the rest of their career probably doing these cases because of the number of claims that were for just Sacramento County.
I'm spending easily 85% of my day just on EDD crimes. And it's unfortunate because, I have city residents who are victims of embezzlement and elder abuse that I'm finding I'm not able to focus on as much because of the amount of EDD cases and the pressure to work through those and arrest someone on them.
And he already has his
theft device ready. As soon as he puts the camera card in there, it starts rolling. As it starts to play, we'll see him, listen to him inputting his PIN number, and then within a few moments it's up and running.
Okay, so basically what the crooks do is they're going to place this generally on the right-hand side. You can see it's got magnets and sticky stuff. It's both sticky and magnetic, okay? And they actually will put this on the side of the machine.
So that's him entering the buttons.
Then they take this device, which is basically the card reader, and they insert this into the card reader itself. And as you can see right here, in here, it's actually going to capture the magnetic strip data.
And it's that quick?
It's that quick. So 10 seconds later, another car pulls up, not even noticing anything.
With a normal bank card, if you were to go to your bank, like I'm with a credit union, I could pull about $300, $400 out at a time. These EDD cards, you could pull out $1,000 at a time.
So many of these calls coming through with EDD cases and people having their cards being completely wiped out and drained, and we had no idea how it was happening. And then we got wind of this, and this is what we figured it out, and nobody really knew.
I've been a prosecutor for a lot of years. Grifters and fraudsters are out there looking for any weakness, and unfortunately, they identified a lot of weaknesses in the EDD process in terms of distributing money, and they took full advantage of it.
There's a law called asset forfeiture, so you can take things as a result of that. That law, as far as we know, does not apply to this. So while we would like to be able to take their Maseratis they bought with the taxpayers, or all the other things that they bought with the taxpayer dollars, we don't have that tool right now. So that is hopefully a legislative fix. I would like to think our legislature would be interested in that.
It's a little more nuanced than that. The DA, but generally speaking, she is correct. California's asset forfeiture law is very narrow, and it's really directed only at drug dealers at this point in time. When you get the conviction and there's a sentence, have the judge order it as restitution to go back to EDD as the victim of the crime.
It is white-collar crime. And the way things are looked at right now, not a lot of resources are thrown towards it. And that's really the big issue. And how do we change that?
The result, a sweeping set of bills from 9 assembly members. Bills they say will ensure changes in the department.
State Assembly passed 2 in a series of bills to reform the state's troubled employment development department.
Yeah, Assembly Bill 110 would require EDD cross-reference records of those who are behind bars with unemployment records.
So, first in fraud, what is your updated estimate of the fraud that was perpetrated throughout the pandemic?
Of the $177 billion that was paid out, $20 billion is estimated to be fraudulent.
We're now at 20 billion and counting. I mean, the odds of getting this back?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because in all candor, my thought when I took this position as special counsel was, well, it's all gone. We're never going to see any of this money. Now, but I've been pleasantly surprised. And it's going to be pennies on the dollar. There's no way around that. But I can tell you that we have seen a number of investigations, both at the federal and the local level, in which cash, large amounts of cash, are being seized pursuant to search warrants.
So you can put this on camera if you like. What I know about fraud is that most often what we see is just on the surface, that there are layers and layers beneath that. So if someone were to come up and tell me that there's $30 billion in EDD fraud, I would increase that by 4 or 5 times, because generally that's how fraud works. We only see what's on the surface. If you really dig into it and start processing it and start investigating it even further, I would say, in my estimation, just if you want to say call a layman's estimation, then I would say we're probably going to creep up close to 100 billion.
It's about accountability. It should have been done a long time ago. People should have been held accountable. And in my mind, no one has been held accountable still. It never should have been allowed to happen. How do you have that happen?
Of all the folks, all the employees at EDD, management or otherwise, do you know roughly how many have been terminated for substandard job performance since you became director?
I'd have to get some statistics on that.
Do you have a rough sense of it? Is it, single digits,
I don't.
double digits?
No, I don't, and I don't have any sense that it's an unusual amount.
I mean, we're talking 12 years in one instance with the recommendations from the auditor. They ignored that. This is going to help you and help your department, and yet you ignore it. And it didn't sit well with me. It doesn't sit well today, and it shouldn't with the citizens.
I'm here to tell you that I have made changes.
But I mean, in terms of what is allowable for you to do under either state law or the relevant contracts?
There is a balance between protections of employees and the kinds of processes that have to be undertaken to move employees out.
Significant steps still need to be taken to address areas of risk where if EDD doesn't continue to follow through on some of the initial positive first steps is taken, then it won't fully realize the benefits for Californians that need its assistance.
When we issued the EDD reports, we said, these are the things you need to do immediately. These are things you need to have done by May of 2021, by the fall of 2021. And that allows us to hold EDD accountable as far as reporting back to the legislature.
I do think that EDD has taken great strides. I do think that's the case. I don't think we should have been here, that we ever had to do this, but we can't go back in time. All we can do is move forward.
I am hopeful, but it's taken way too long. It's been over a year. How can that be acceptable? How can that be acceptable? It's not. It's not. And I just want people to know that there are many of us who find it to be unacceptable and are doing our level best to fix it.
I don't have a lot of hope.
And white-collar crime is treated with kid gloves for the most part.
You look at the two audits before, where they give them specific instructions on how to change it and improve their process. They failed to do that. And the only way they're going to do something is having their feet to the fire. So I think there'll be some changes, but will there be drastic changes? I don't think so. It's just business as usual, and that's unfortunate. In the end, it's costing the taxpayers money, and it's ruined a lot of people's lives.